Hello, everybody. Welcome again to our online talk series in Riyadh Java User Group. In Riyadh Java User Group, here we invite and we host all the speakers around the world to speak about the beautiful language Java and its related technologies. So we have conducted a couple of amazing sessions in the past. Please go and check them in our YouTube channel at RiyadhJag. And also you can check our Twitter account, RiyadhJag. Today we have a special guest. Arthur, thanks for being with us. How are you, Arthur?
So it's probably my
Uh,
time now. Or do
yes,
you
you
want
can go
to?
ahead.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. It's a very nice opportunity for me because most of the time, whenever I was talking with mostly for the Europe, one time in US, never in your part of the world. So I'm pretty excited. It's nice to be part of the community. Okay, so today during my presentation, we'll be talking about the sustainability in case of the technology. So I will try to unpack whatever we are talking about whenever we are talking about the green IT. So the presentation is called at the beginning of 2024. However, we are probably in the second half of the year. Probably I would just rename it. Still, I hope everything should be reasonably up to date. Okay, so maybe a short introduction to myself, why I'm even talking about it. My name is Artur Skowroński, and I am head of Java Kotlin development in Virtus Lab company in Poland. I'm from Poland. Our company is a consulting company, mostly in the JVM space. We are probably best known from the fact that we are current stewards of the Scala language. I don't know how many of you had opportunity to work with Scala. We are currently responsible for making it better with each new release as a part of the Scala Foundation, and we have responsibility of simply releasing new version of Scala. If you have any Scala questions, probably I'm not the best person to ask them because, like I said, I'm from the Java Kotlin development department. However, it's probably what most people in JVM space can know our company from. There will be one another disclaimer because I'm from Poland, like I already mentioned, so part of the European Union. European Union is probably quite unique in their approach to regulation. I don't know if unique, however, I would whenever I was talking that talk in the past, I was focusing mostly on the regulatory part. That won't be case today because each part of the world can have a bit different regulation. I don't want to bore you. It's not my goal. So today will be a bit more technical. However, still I need to introduce a lot of theory because to talk about the topic of sustainability without just skimming over the surface with an appropriate amount of depth, I think we need to understand what we are talking about. Yeah, so this time let's start with the presentation, and I will start with a short introduction about myself because I'm myself rough reading books on my e-reader device. The reason I have a young daughter, 3 years old, and most of time I have opportunity to read books whenever I'm just putting her to sleep, and the light is turned off, so books are not the physical books are not practical because they do not have backlight. And whenever I read books, probably the most surprising fact is that I don't know if you have experience reading books. Probably most of you had that opportunity. So there is very surprising thing about ending of the books because whenever you have a physical books, you mostly know how much left, how much information, how much pages is left before the end of the book. With ebooks, most of the time, I'm surprised. I'm surprised because amount of the footprints, amount of any information that is put as a reference, unfortunately, can be such huge that In some books, the amount of those can even be greater than the book itself. And that example, I have quite important example for the topic of our presentation. It's Not the End of the World by Hannah Ritchie, how we can be the third generation to build a sustainable planet. I'm talking about this book because first thing is very great to talk whenever we are talking about sustainability, and I think I learned a lot from it. And the other fact is that it is mostly references. So whenever I like approach of the author that whenever she is having using any data, having any information, provides any information, she tries to have the reference. And my goal here is quite similar because most discussion about the global warming, about the sustainability, stuff like that, they are focused mostly on opinions, I can say that way. However, especially in the ITC information technology space, because everybody knows that AI is taking a lot of energy. Everybody knows that ITC industry takes a huge amount of the current energy consumption. However, nobody tries to use the data, or the data that are presented are pretty shallow. So I would like to change that at least a bit, and today we'll be talking about that particular topic. By the end of the presentation, we'll also have, because this is Java user group, discuss situation in the Java environment, how it looks like in our small space. Okay, so today, like I said, my goal is not to sell you anything. My goal is not to provide. I don't have. You can assume I don't have any particular opinion. The only thing is that I have some data to share, and probably we can discuss about them a bit later. Okay, so like I said, to even have a discussion, we need to have a common ground, and I would like to start with that because I would like to focus on that particular statement. What are we talking about when we talk about the green technology? What is that well-used term carbon footprint? Because it's pretty interesting. Everybody is saying information, okay, carbon footprint that, carbon footprint this, however, without using the proper definition. So I decided to check what is the proper definition of the carbon footprint apart of CO2 emitted to the atmosphere. And using so-called, because everything is standardized in the current world, so using so-called life cycle assessment approach, whenever we are talking about the carbon footprint, we are taking into account all possible sources of greenhouse gas emissions: methane, carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, ACT, and etc., and converting those different gases to a single unit of measurement so they can be added up. And to explain what we are talking about, the fact is most of the standards do not use CO2 emission. They are using so-called CO2 equivalents. They are calculated by comparing the global warming potential of different gases, greenhouse gases, for the carbon dioxide. So whenever somebody is using, and this is commonly used term, CO2 emission. Whenever somebody is using CO2 emission, most of times it's already oversimplification. Because that's pretty interesting that, for example, one portion of methane is equal to the 25 CO2, have 25 times such a heating power, atmospheric heating power like CO2. So, as you see, the greenhouse gases are not equal. However, to make it a bit more complicated, sorry for that, does it mean that methane, so CH4, is worse than CO2? Because, like we said, it's 25 times such in the CO2 equivalents. It's complicated. It's complicated because to calculate that, we do not only need to take into account the fact that given emission heating power of particular molecule, but also how long it will stay in the atmosphere. And while CO2 is staying for a long period of time, methane is shorter. It's just destroyed pretty shortly. So even calculating those two, even using the proper approach with proper life cycle assumption, yeah, it will mean that we need to simplify it a bit, like on during the lesson of physics. However, I would like to start with that information that whenever we are talking about the carbon footprint, it's not that easy, and we are not focusing only on the CO2. So, okay, so going further into the definition space, let's talk about which emissions should we really count, because that's also not that easy. That's also something that many organizations are putting wrongly, especially whenever we are talking about the organization, some kind of the regulatory space, some kind of the carbon accounting. So whatever companies needs to publish to the public. Okay, because in recent years, there was a lot of discussion about so-called transferring environmental impacts. People are calling the creative accounting. What does it mean in practice? In practice, that means that, for example, we have company in Germany, and company in Germany is on their own soil, they have only the parts that do not have a proper huge amount of emissions, for example, offices and the R&D, and all the I would say polluting part of the automotive industry, they are transferred, for example, to Poland, because we have a lot of. That's why I'm interested in the topic, because we have quite a lot of plain old industrial areas, and for example, to China. Or other Asian countries, they are pretty well known from that particular transferring, being the destination for such transferring. So to make it a bit tighter and more self-describing, to understand what even transferring carbon emission means for the particular countries, companies, industries. To just break the circle of complaining about each other, there was greenhouse gas protocol created. And what greenhouse gas protocol is saying us? It's pretty interesting, because greenhouse gas protocol is a set of standards and guidelines for measuring, managing, and reporting greenhouse gas emissions by companies and organizations. It was developed by the World Resources Institute and World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And what is the biggest, at least from my opinion, the biggest, their biggest introduction to the discussion, addition to the discussion, they created so-called scopes. And the first scope, there are three of those. The first scope, so-called direct emissions, whenever we're talking about the scope 1, these are greenhouse gas emissions that come directly from sources owned or controlled by the company. So examples include exhaust fumes emitted from the chimneys of a factory it owns, or the burning of fuel by company cars. So exactly that thing that most people have in mind whenever talking about the carbon emission. However, like you see, it's just the scope 1. Let's look on the scope 2. Scope 2 are so-called indirect emissions. So by indirect emissions, we mean that this includes the emissions that from the production of electricity, heat or steam that company buys and consumes. Because the truth is that, for example, for the IT industry and for modern industry, I can say, a lot of emission is a lot of emissions that company create are just through electricity. So as this is one of the biggest portion of emission of any given company, greenhouse gas protocol, the people responsible for greenhouse gas protocol decided, okay, let's create the particular scope for that kind of the emissions. And that's the scope 2. And the scope 3 are so-called other indirect emissions. And this is the very broad category, probably the less defined one. However, also one of the most interesting ones, because it includes all other gas emissions that result from the company operation, but don't come from sources that company does not own or control. That means, okay, production of the supply chain, so production of the materials, so it's not that easy, okay, we can just move, buy the materials for our high-end components from the location that is polluting more, and we can call it a day. We need to calculate in our all carbon emission, or even things like customer use of the product, which company sells. So plane tickets, that were needed for sales representative to go to the client. For very interesting, probably the most my favorite example of the scope 3 emissions are the fact that due to the general definition, nobody is doing that. However, just to have the full coverage, we should take into account to our of the mission the fact that the client needs to use the mobile phone and have that mobile phone so he can use, for example, our one application. So as you can see, greenhouse gas protocol is pretty broad. Nobody is calculating scope 3 properly. However, it's good to have in mind that we have it covered with all the international standards. Okay. Whatever I was talking till now was pretty generic. So let's have discussion on how does software fit into this. And it fits pretty nicely because those scopes are quite well mapped to how we currently have our infrastructure done. Because for the IT industry, we can define two scopes of the two sources of the carbon footprint. If we are talking just about the simple server software company, we can say about the energy that is used by the company laptops and company equipment, and the hardware, so-called embodied emissions. So the fact that we needed to buy carbon, we need to buy hardware. And if you, as you see on this, in this table, for example, if we have private cloud, so we have our own servers in the simplification. Energy that is consumed by those servers is our scope 2. And fact that those servers needed to be produced is scope 3. For the public cloud, it's we do not have scope 2 in that situation of the just infrastructure because we do not have any servers. However, energy that was used to power hardware in the cloud computing for the cloud computer provider, should be calculated as our own emission. For the front hybrid cloud, energy plus hardware, energy plus hardware. So we are taking both scopes into the accounting. And for the scope 3 and for the front end, just front end, like I said, for example, fact that hardware user needed to buy hardware, the hardware needs to be powered, also should be our scope 3. Like I said, theory. I do not suggest that from now you simply should discuss the topic and put it in your sprint backlog. However, just wanted to give you a bit broader context. Well, no. Okay, so that was, once again, greenhouse gas protocol is a protocol that is used to cover all the possible industries. However, each of the industry needs a bit different standards to be able to just doing it in a reasonable way. Because, like I said, nobody will be using general standard to calculate the energy level of the mobile phones. That's not possible. That's why in the wake of the term each industry should regulate itself, in software industry, Green Software Foundation was created. And Green Software Foundation is the body that steering members you are able to see on the screen. So we have GitHub there, Intel, Microsoft, Siemens, UBS, a lot of big companies. ThoughtWorks Consulting was one of the original members of FunFact. However, there is far more companies that is involved. So we can say that Green Software Foundation is the one that is the most most influential for the topic and how we can handle it within IT industry. And they created something that is called software carbon intensity specification. And by software carbon intensity specification, we are talking about the methodology developed by them, by the standard working group, to assess software application for sustainability and encourage actions to eliminate emissions. And because, like we said, GHG protocol, it calculates total emission. So it's very good for calculating, okay, we need to create the report for the public each year. We can use greenhouse gas protocol for that, just to calculate how many emissions we did. However, it's not saying a lot about what we can do right now. It's just the accounting. SCI, so software carbon intensity specification, is helping us understand what is our emission factor. So SCI is more like measuring fuel consumption per mile, while the GHG protocol is more like the total carbon footprint of a car manufacturer. It's not the same, both are important. However, as you imagine, probably SCI is better performance metric for most of the things. And what is the specificity of the software carbon intensity? It's rather than dividing software carbon emission into scope 1, 3, it divides them into operational emissions, so carbon emissions from the running the software, and embedded emissions, so carbon emissions from the physical resources required to run the software, so servers. It is therefore based on the intensity rather than total quantity. What does it mean in practice? As you see, those equation is pretty simple. We are taking to calculate our software carbon intensity. We are taking into account few parameters. The first one is the energy consumed by software in the kilowatts per hour, and carbon emitter per kilowatts per hour of energy that is average in the economy, because each country can have a bit different CO2 cost of the creation of the kilowatt of energy. Because, for example, if you can compare the Poland, we have one of the biggest emission level in the Europe, and Norway, that is one of the lowest because they are using mostly renewable energy. You can simply see that those two should it impact how our software is impacts the overall climate. So those two are just multiplied by each other. Additionally, we need to add the carbon emitted to the hardware, and there it's getting a bit complicated because we are just should we just talk about the hardware creation of the hardware, or time, how long target hardware is used? Most of the time is just simplified. So we are simply talking about the hardware when it was buy, and we updating the equation, updating the information about that whenever we need to replace and maintenance the inner hardware. And that level, so total energy level of the software, because energy multiplied by cost of the CO2 plus emission of the created using the creation of the hardware, we are dividing per amount of the users, because there is a difference if we are using the 1,000 kilowatts of energy per user or per million users. So this is very clever. Equation, because we can manipulate our STI parameter by multiple different factors. For example, we can use less energy. So, for example, switching from the Intel CPUs to the ARM CPUs. Example, we can use our hardware longer. So the embodied energy, emission will be simply smaller. What's more, we can just have more users. If you have more users, our energetic impact is getting lower and lower per users, and that's what is the most interesting for the STA specification. And what is probably most interesting in that rather simple equation is the fact that it became ISO standard last May. So if ever we can expect any true regulations and any expectation from the regulators about the level of emission of the software and how it will be calculated, we can bet on the SCI because, like I mentioned, it's currently an ICO standard. However, it's not the only standard that showed up in the recent months, recent years, because one probably from the most interesting ones is Web Sustainability Guidelines WSG. It's part of the W3C, so the body that is regulating and standardizing the internet. They decided to focus on the topic. And what I love about the standards is their findings, the results of the work. The fact that, for example, we can minimize environmental and reduce data transfer by compressing files, managing duplicate data, storing them, caching, using the latest JavaScript APIs, avoid unnecessary assets. So everything that in the past was connected to just writing the performant code. Now we can focus on that to create also code that has lesser environmental impact. So if we ever wanted to have a good argument to write the good performant code, we are doing that for the planet. However, there's one very interesting part of that. There's one very interesting part of that specification. For example, there's write with purpose in an accessible, easy to understand format. And there is pretty good explanation what is that happening, because if you are writing in an accessible way, people need less time to read your document, and through that they are using less energy because screen is light less time. I find it pretty amusing. Okay, carrying on with carbon emission standard. There is yet another interesting one. There is a draft for the HTTP protocol to express through the one of the headers information about the CO2 emission of the given request. This way, people would be able to calculate the scope 3 more reasonable. However, it's one's curiosity for now. However, I also found it pretty amusing. Okay, so carrying on with the topic. We probably just skip that part because, like I said, it's mostly about the regulation, about the current findings and different levels. It's not that important for today. What I would like to present you now is discussion about the cloud computing. Because cloud computing, whenever we are talking about the American giants of the IT industry, so Google, Microsoft, they are using the term carbon neutral. Whenever they are, during my career, and I'm in the industry more than 10 years, I've seen multiple headlines about the going carbon neutral, being zero emissions, things like that. For example, as you see, Google aims to go carbon neutral by the end 2007. So in 2007. Next, in the 2018, I see that Google now purchased more renewable energy than it consumes as a company. Okay, I thought they went carbon neutral in 2007. Once again, this is from the previous 2020. Google announced one of the biggest green pledges from the tech. It will run carbon-free energy by 2030. So they were carbon neutral in 2007. Now they are want to be carbon-free by 2030. I think I find it strange. However, whenever I find something strange, I decided to go a bit deeper into the details, and I found that all those statements, they are pretty reasonable and pretty interesting, because simply things like the carbon-free, carbon neutral cannot be 100% renewable. They cannot be used interchangeably because they mean a bit different things. For example, those carbon neutral from 2007, whenever it was used in very specific context. because they were talking about offsetting emissions that could not be, if to offset emissions that could not be reduced immediately, Google invested in external projects that absorb CO2 or reduce emissions elsewhere. So, for example, whenever they are using energy to power their big data centers, they finance wind farms, solar installation, or purchase so-called carbon credit and forest initiatives that bind CO2 through the photosynthesis of the trees. So they are polluting in one place, however, they were making the situation better in the other and call it a day. So that was what happened in 2007. In 2017, whenever Google said that they have 100% renewable energy, that meant that they have zero emission in 24-hour operation. In practice, this does not mean that every operation of the company was powered directly by renewable sources. So it's not that the energy is fully clean, but the company purchased enough renewable energy, or renewable energy credits, that's the other thing, to offset its total energy consumption. And while this definition seems a bit convoluted, let's take a look on this graph. It's saying a lot. As you see, Google is buying whatever is on the green, is a green chart, and their demand for the energy is the black chart. The demand for energy is pretty constant through the day. Whenever we are talking about the day, we are talking about the night. However, it's far easier to generate the carbon-free energy during the day, as we have opportunity to use the solar power. That's why Google is buying a lot of free energy, so investing carbon-free energy, so investing into the ecosystem. Meanwhile, during the night, they are still using the classic coal-based energy or any other source. So they could just run on the just carbon-free energy because they are buying enough. Unfortunately, the current technical level is not allowing that because they are not able to generate such a spike of energy during the night. So the current goal is all carbon-free stuff they were talking about, is that in the 2030, there will be zero emission in each 1 hour. That means that not only would the energy used by Google come from the 100% renewable sources, but all the company procedures, products, and operations will produce no carbon dioxide or other greenhouse gas emissions. So they just they do not want to offset using of just buying more energy than the necessary during the day and using the coal during the night. They want to be zero tolerance for the carbon footprint each hour a day. Will that be possible? We will see. However, there is their current pledge. Okay, I think that this Google is pretty good in describing those things. I decided it's pretty nice example. And now let's go focus on the programming languages because we are closer to Java. Sorry for not having Java for the most of the presentation. However, I think I still need some interesting findings from documents. Because probably the most viral document about the energy usage of the programming language is towards a green ranking for programming language. It's document from 2018, something like that. And it was then followed in 2020 with energy efficiency across programming language, which added some additional language. Especially important here was Ada, because Ada is very energy. It's not using that much energy. Okay, and what are the most interesting findings from this document? Because it split languages between different categories. The one that use the less time for doing the computation, the one that's doing the less and using the less amount of energy for the computation, and additionally how much RAM needed to be used, how much energy is needed to be used by memory used by the language. So because they are memory for using less energy, less memory, the one that using more memory, and they wanted to differentiate between those. And what is probably the most interesting finding is that execution time is not equal to energy efficiency. We can have languages that are running pretty fast, However, they will be using overall more amount of energy because, for example, their computation is much more CPU heavy. And they just split languages between different categories. The one that is losing the less the amount time of memory, the less, and that is something that is pretty insignificant because one of the most interesting, from my opinion, finding is that the memory is not very energy. No, the energy use of memory is not that important because in the overall calculation it doesn't count much. And probably the most interesting fact is that if we want to be as sustainable as possible, we should use one of the languages from the energy and time list, because here we can see the biggest difference. For example, there is huge difference between energy from the top of the language from the top of the list, because first the C that we have, I would say, it's our standard variable, so C is 1. Java is just 2 times more energy heavy. However, Python can be up to 75% more impactful for energy usage. So there are languages who are very, very, they're much more using much more power to do the same amount of computation. So Java is quite high. It's the highest language if you are talking about the J1 that has virtual machine. So we can be pretty proud of ourselves. Whenever somebody asks us why we are using Java, we can say we are doing that for the planet, because C is not that much performant anymore. Still, one additional disclaimer. As you probably know, the calculation time is just the tip of the iceberg. Because to calculate just to calculate the full amount of the energy you wasted, we are talking about the energy for debugging, JIT compilers, lifecycle of machines, skills of the engineering team. Because, for example, if we are producing our software longer time, probably overall we'll be able to use more amount of energy. So such a calculation needs to be taken into. They are just I would say approximation, and once again curiosity more than something we should rely on very much. Okay, we are not wrapping yet. However, we are getting to the next session that is called AI, because everybody is talking about AI as a killer for the planet energy. Previous one of those was blockchain. Now we are talking about the AI, that AI will kill us all and burn our planet. So once again, I decided it's worth to find any sources of that statement, and if anybody truly calculated those, and probably the most widespread document or research paper that we can find in the market is estimating the carbon footprint of Bloom, 166 billion parameters language model. It's document from the last year, so current models can be a bit bigger. However, we can say it's one of the state-of-the-art documents. And there's pretty important statement in it that to calculate one calculation of such a model, one training of such a model is taking the amount of energy like 40 single family US houses per year, or 5.5 average cars per year. And I started to ask myself question, is that big? And I asked my friends who are more in the machine learning space what they think about it, and they mentioned me that their training of such a model happens once, twice a year. So training of a big model, if it averaged to 10 cars a year, it's not that big, in my opinion, personal. Definitely not something we should communicate thoughts widely in the media, especially the media that do not know what they are talking about. Still, inference and using probably has much bigger impact. Training itself is not, at least in my opinion. However, if the fact is that even those numbers can change a bit, because there's ongoing development in how our machine learning models are trained. And there's pretty nice document, the carbon footprint of, once again, research paper, carbon footprint of machine learning training will plateau, then shrink. And fact is that machine learning currently is using a lot, like we said, there is using quite a lot of energy. However, all the researchers said that it won't be something that will be ongoing in the future. At least it will shrink in the future due to 4 different reasons. The first one is that we have better models. So we are choosing more efficient architectures for machine learning models while developing machine learning quality, such as the sparse models, so the one that is using the memory better, and we have better algorithms, dense models that, we have dense models that are using the energy more efficiently, and those ways we can improve performance by around 5 to 10 times, just by having better models. We also have better machines because each of the big cloud computing providers currently is investing a lot in those new kinds of the CPUs and GPUs, especially which are much more effective, energy efficient per the training operation, especially in comparison to the general purpose processors, and they can be improved in the future. What's more, mechanization, because most of the workloads are currently in the cloud computing, and cloud computing can just use energy efficiency in the data centers because they have the scale, they are able to have it created in the better way. Okay, they have just economy of scale and are able to reduce the cost factor once again. And there is also a map, and the map is probably the most interesting part because it's connected to those cost per kilowatt energy of the energy. As we are having cloud computing, and cloud computing providers, they have data centers in different parts of the world. We are able to just do some let's assume in Poland, in Norway during a day, they are using the solar energy, so there is opportunity to have very cheap energy. However, when there is night in Norway, you can carry on with calculation in the other part of the world using the cheap renewable energy all the time. So cloud providers promise that those four mechanisms allow us to train model more cheaply and more energy efficient, guiding us to the cloud green heaven of the cloud computing. However, I have just one problem with that. As you probably have seen, most of those mechanisms, they are strictly connected to the big tech, big players on the market, and I worried that going into very efficient way of computation will just need to be part of going to cloud, because the cost of producing the amount of energy in our own data center would be unfeasible, and that will monopolize the market. However, this is something probably needs to. We'll have that discussion in the future. Okay. I needed to stop in the 45 minutes. However, I will just take 5 minutes from your question time because I would like to focus on 2 more topics. The first one is tolling. Because, like I mentioned, most of our applications are currently in the cloud. And what does it mean in practice? In practice, that means that all those carbon calculations are done on the cloud provider side. And to know how much energy was used by our application, we do not know that, because that we have many abstraction layers between us and those informations. However, each of the big providers currently has their own carbon footprint accounting dashboard. As you see, that one is from AWS, that one is from the Azure. We have also one with Google Cloud Platform. Everybody is sharing those data. However, they are using totally different metrics and totally different approach to those. That's why they are created standards created to how to commoditize those data, for example, for companies that want to compare different cloud providers. And there's cloud carbon footprint emission standard that will allow us to create aggregate information from all the cloud providers. It is something that is pretty widely used by the company that try to be more carbon aware. So it was, even when, if we are talking, if you have ever opportunity to read ThoughtWorks Technology Radar, it's also stated there. However, going one level deeper and finally getting to Java, we are able to calculate also energy power of our application, because cloud provider is just the interesting abstraction. However, it's not very informative how we should work in our code. For Java, there's pretty interesting Java agent, JVM agent called JoularJX, which is Java-based energy for agent for software power monitoring at the source code level. In practice, it means that it is able to wrap each method with information about its energy usage, and for that it uses power cap interface that is able to accurately read power on the GNU Linux. For the macOS, it's able also to use mechanism of the power metrics tool bundled with the macOS, and for the Windows, it all uses the mechanism of Intel Power Gadgets API. So it uses the information provided by the CPU itself to give us the feedback. What we can see there is the similar to all the other benchmarking tools, time sorted data. That what given run of the method showed us about the what run of the particular method resulted with in case of the energy usage. Okay, so wrapping everything up, we have one more question. Is there the greenest JVM? And as you already know, greenest is very, very hard to define. Fortunately, there are people who tried to work with that. One of those is Mr. Jonud Balasin, who tried to compare each of the available JVM for the using of JVM with JDK21 to compare how different how different JDKs compare to each other. And fact is that it used exactly the same mechanism like it was in the like JoularJX, because it used power metrics for macOS, power stat for the GNU machines, and through that. And through using of the SCI, he decided to calculate some carbon footprint factor of each of the different JVMs, comparing, for example, things like the standard hotspot JVM to GraalVM native image. And what is pretty interesting is his approach, because he decided that he wants to compare end-to-end usage of energy of a given application. And that makes a big difference, because as you can see, I don't know if I have any GraalVM users in the room. However, GraalVM itself is using in application in form of the native image is using far less energy than any other distribution. However, native image with profile guided optimization, so all those mechanisms that goal is to make it faster, it is on par with the JVM. Why is that? It's because to create such optimized image, we need to use such amount of the energy that in the 2 hours period, because it was used for the calculation, it's even out with the energy usage of the standard virtual machines. To give you this is that iceberg I was talking about, that for example JIT compilers and energy for compilation itself, it's making a difference. What are the results of the whole experiment? Oracle GraalVM native image without PGO Azure Prime VM, Oracle Graal VM, Graal VMC, and Hotspot, they are quite similar. However, for the JVM, OpenJ9 from the Eclipse is the one that is using the moderate overall energy consumption, but is also the lowest performance. So depending on our current needs, we can do some mixing there. Okay, so I'm wrapping up because I'm running out of time already, a bit behind the time. So thoughts I would like to leave you with: the fact that climate change is the real problem, and this is probably something that we'll fight with in the future because all the reports are showing us it is a problem. However, for us as the software engineers, there's not that much we can do to be able to cope with problem of sustainability of our application, because most work can be done on the cloud provider space. They can invest into the clean energy, they can invest into the all the mechanism of, for example, running on the RMs and making cost effective. So what we can do most effective software, because if we have most effective software, probably they do not need to invest that much in the infrastructure. And there is that old proverb that premature optimization is the root of all evil, which is highly wrongly understood in the current landscape. So making performance software is important. And there's other proverb that developer's time is more valuable than the server's time. Yes, that's true. That probably sometimes we can just write the application that is less performant but it will be run on the biggest amount of servers. This way, it's our industry own way of the carbon emissions delegation, create a transmission to the cloud centers. Because as we are creating the less efficient software, it needs to be run on the bigger amount of the servers. So still, what we can do, just write the more performant software. So in practice, that's probably the biggest goal. If we just, as the industry agree, we are able to be more conscious with what we are doing and do not bring unperforming applications to production, we probably can fight with the sustainable, allow cloud providers fight with their energy usage a bit better. One last thing, and it will be probably the last, is so-called Jevons paradox, because there is pretty interesting case of the Norway car industry, because Norway it's very European centric. However, I will share with you. Norway for years were mostly focused on the using of the subsidizing of the electric cars. And they were doing that, and they have problem now because as they were subsidizing the electric cars, unfortunately, they decided not to invest the public transport, which in the long run is better for the environment. And that's exactly Jevons paradox. The Jevons paradox is saying that the fact itself that we are more efficient using the resources, for example, we are able to create the better performing application and use the one that use the less amount of energy. Doesn't mean we'll use less energy. It practically can mean that we'll be just using the more, we're just writing the more application because they will be cheaper to run and everything equal in the practice. So a lot of people is already talking about the scope 4, that not each of the software, not each of the emission needs to be even commenced, even done. So probably sometimes we just should ask ourselves, should we even write given software? And if all those big microservice fleet is really necessary. And that will be all. As you see in the presentation, I'll share the presentation with you after the meetup. You will be able to find all the data sources I used during today's talk. And I would like to thank you and waiting for your questions.
Thank you so much, Arthur, for this presentation. There is a question regarding the carbon credits and the green technologies. So, is there any relation between them, or they are totally different things?
Like I said, the most carbon credits, if you mean by carbon credits the amounts of,
Yes.
they need to be, yeah, they need to be bought by the those old energy the data center companies, because currently we do not have the direct regulations, because I skipped the regulatory part because it can differ between the world. However, the one thing is in common. I didn't found any regulation that, for example, would tell, okay, our software needs to be using less energy and needs to use given amount the carbon credit. The only thing that is in the different regulation that we need to, the, for example, cloud centers, the cloud data centers need to report amount of the energy used, and they are using carbon footprints to buy the energy to power their data centers. So they need to buy the carbon credits. So in
Yeah.
this way, we can connect that a bit. However, it's not directly influence the software itself. It influences the
Mm.
infrastructure we are running upon. So if we have our own data center, probably if we write more performant software, we need to buy less carbon credits. But that's indirect relation.
Yes, yes, I agree, 100%. So there's another question with regards to GraalVM. Now it's like claimed that using GraalVM will make our performance better, but though at the same time it consumes time. So how we can give trade-off between this? I think you did, yes, cover
Yeah.
this as a
Yeah, this
brief
is
as a
something
brief.
for the standard native image that is less performant. Because why PGO? Why PGO is necessary? This is the profile gated optimization. So native image. So with, once again, simplification, because we are talking about the benchmark. When we're talking about benchmark, there's also simplification. Native image is 80%. Peak performance of native image is 80% of peak performance of the fully warm up JIT machine, JVM JIT machine. So they are using less energy. This is more. They are using less resources. However, it will have a bit less performance, 20%. This is just, I would say, common numbers. It's changed between version and version. With PGO, so this how PGO works. PGO works in the, it's part of the Oracle GraalVM, and it works in the way that whenever we run our application in the production, it is profiled, so we have information about the real data, how the given methods are used. We are able to preserve them, and then when we compile the native image next time, we are able to use that information to just have better performing native image. And that's native image PGO. However, collecting those data and using those data is taking energy by itself. That's why the energy usage of that more performant images is not that is bigger than the native images without this optimization. That's why this star. On in the end, it can even out, because like you see, we are talking about 2 hours runtime. In the longer period, and most of the time we are not running our application for the 2 hours, but for the longer period of time, it should even out. So I still think that using PGO native image and native image is giving the biggest impact. However, probably if we are not using 100% of our native image performance, having one without PGO is theoretically the best option.
Yeah, I see, I
However,
see.
like I said, it's just the curiosity in this case, because it's do not the numbers are not that okay. They are quite big, because like we see, native image here is there's less amount of VAT in the substantial way than any other options. However, probably that even out with other stuff that are we are just paying for the CPUs and servers. So most of the time we don't have our the CPUs are not bored. Okay, I would say that way. So
Yeah,
if
yeah,
I
I
can say
think it sounds
something,
good.
native due to numbers, the best option is used if for short period of time is just the native image. If we are not using the full capacity of the given servers and we don't want to have a peak performance of a given machine, the best options from the energy perspective is using the simple using of the native image without the PGO.
Okay, I see. Thank you so much. I think there are no other questions. If you have any final words to wrap up the session, Mr. Arthur, thank you so much.
Yeah. So from me, it was very nice experience, and I hope you like it. So thank you
Yes,
very much. It was great experience for me,
thank you so much
and
for
wish you see you
accepting our
next.
invitation.
Yeah, I wish see
Yeah,
you one time next. See you again when next time. Maybe one time I will have opportunity to visit Riyadh, and I will let you know in the advance. That would be
yeah,
pretty
sure,
fun.
sure, sure,
Yeah.
sure, sure. Yeah, it's our pleasure, really. Thank you
Okay. I
so
hope you
much,
like it.
Mr. Arthur. Yeah, yeah, sure, sure. Thank you so much for this
Thank you.
presentation, and see you later. Thank you. Goodbye.
Okay. Bye bye. Have a good day.
Thank you.